Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Community Chess Bursary Seminar. I think this is always such an exciting time for Community Chess when we engage our students. This year has been a challenging year, I think challenging for all of us. The huge adjustments we all had to instantly just wrap around our heads around it and kind of find a way of how we were going to deal with this health global pandemic that we're all facing, we're currently still facing. And there's been so many transitions and changes that has taken place over the past few months now. And our bursary students have, of course, been a huge factor in terms of our work, our huge concern and really support that we needed to provide our students in terms of not going to campus, doing online learning. It has been such a challenging time. So I really want to thank all of you for being here today, for joining us with this webinar. And I think you all would have seen the invitation, and we're looking at building resilient future leaders during a global pandemic. And so today is all about really looking at what we're currently going through and the challenges that we've all been experiencing, and specifically for yourselves in terms of where you are at. And so today we have a special guest that's joining us, Zulani Metu. And I'll chat and tell you a bit more about him when I formally introduce him. But thank you very much, Zulani, for joining us here today. And Zulani is going to really speak to us around mental wellness and well-being around this really challenging time that we're still experiencing. I think it's exams coming up now for all of you. And that just takes you to another level of anxiety, I think, because now things are kind of normal and it's still not normal. So I really hope, Zulani, from your side, you'll really be engaging the students. And I think us as Community Chess staff that's present here, we always look forward to this engagement with our students. I would just like to introduce, and you all know who this is, the CEO of Community Chess, Lorenzo Davids. And Lorenzo is going to be doing a formal just welcoming to all of you. I think Lorenzo is extremely passionate around currently what's been happening with our students. And how we as Community Chess can assist you. So thank you very much, Lorenzo, for joining us, and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Humna, and great to be with you all today. Welcome to this 2020 Bursary Seminar. We always enjoy this space, and so I'm delighted to share with you this afternoon on this journey as you get to the end of this year, and also prepare for 2021, which is around the corner. I'm looking forward to listening to Zulani this afternoon, so I'm going to speak very briefly and get out of the way so that we can listen to somebody who knows what he's talking about instead of my ramblings. But I'm delighted to welcome him into our room and into the space, and you can enjoy him tremendously. Quickly, just a few reflections from my side. We've come through a very difficult year, 2020. Just when you thought 2020 is ending, 2020 comes back with a bang and hits us all in the face each time. 2020 is going to go down in history as the year we did not want to have. It's like, you're promising yourself you're not going to eat that food again, but it just comes back and it's there on the table and you eat of it more and more and more. That's 2020. The stuff you shouldn't be eating, that's 2020. So a quick reflection from my side. On the 27th of April this year, on Freedom Day, the president gave a Freedom Day speech, and he made three big comments in his Freedom Day speech. He said that what we must do with our reset thinking, our reset message, is that we have to build, firstly, a new consciousness. Secondly, we have to build a new economy. And thirdly, we have to, out of those two things, build a new society. And it's fundamental that in our thinking as students, as fellow sojourners in the pursuit of knowledge, that the understanding of what a new consciousness, a new society, and a new economy looks like is part of our conversation. It's part of who we are as a society. In rebuilding this reset message, we have to make sure that we understand how we as individuals now respond to the pressures of society that is now before us with building this new consciousness. And I want to start just with a new consciousness today because I want to quickly reflect with you. Anne Rand is an American-Russian writer. Anne was born in 1905 and died in 1987. I think she was 77 years old when she passed on 1975. And she wrote a few novels, fiction works, but also some non-fiction work. And she's a fierce defender of the school of thought called objectivism. Very strong individualist thinker. Some don't like her work because of the sort of very sincere and direct thoughts on the individual mind matters. But she writes this book called Atlas Shrugged. And if you have a moment, grab the book. It's an interesting novel called Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. And in it, she opens the book with the question, who is John Galt? And that's the question the book grapples with. Who is John Galt? And throughout the book, you only meet John Galt towards the end of the book. But Anne is born in a period when fascism was rife in Italy, when Nazism was rife in Germany, and when communism was rife in Russia. And she comes from the society, oppressive doctrines, oppressive ideologies, oppressive mindsets. And she flees that in 1926. She moves to the United States post-World War I, post the Russian Revolution, and Nazism and fascism in Italy. And she established herself in the US as a writer and as an academic. And part of what Anne offers in her writing is the fierceness of independent thinking, the brilliance of the mind to protect itself and not to be bought out. And one of the things that we have to do in this pandemic is for you as students to assert that individual thinking, that sense of that my mind stays intact, my mind is profound, my mind is able to comprehend much more than the challenges that I'm with now. Now, I know that Zelani is going to speak to some of those issues, the psychosocial challenges, those emotional stresses, those things that we all try and struggle with. But Anne, in her novel, when she writes about John Galt, she writes about a man who is the son of a mechanic, and he begins to understand how the world works. And slowly but surely, he convinces the other thinkers of his time in this period of great oppression and great difficulty and great strife, and the Industrial Revolution taking off, and the US economy booming, and people rebuilding their lives, and the state becoming more and more powerful post 1926, 1927 into the 30s. And Ayn Rand writes about John Galt, who is this railway engineer who begins to convince the minds of his time to go on strike, to not think, to park their thinking so that the state cannot capture them. And it's a brilliant analogy for our current time, because when the individual mind becomes corrupted, it compromises its integrity and it sells out to the state. And Ryan, in the character of John Galt, goes and they take all the minds and they hide them in this fictional place called Atlantis, where all the minds go and live. And they refuse to think. And there's in fact a chapter called The Mind Goes on Strike. We need your minds. We need your deliberate, brilliant thinking, but not as subservient voices of the state or the corporation or some perverse identity. We need your mind to be active in reconstructing this new consciousness that the president called us to build a robust engagement that allows us, like John Galt, emerge with a set of minds, a collection of minds that begins to shape the world in which we live. Who is John Galt at the end of the book? Ryan in Rand, Ayn Rand, in the end of the book makes this point. We are all John Galt. We are responsible to collect the brilliant minds and bring them into the space so that we can collectively stop the perversion, stop the consumption, stop this selling out to big corporations, stop this being co-opted into the bureaucracies of the world, and allow the brilliance of our minds to live freely, individually, in connection to other brilliant minds, because that's how we survive. Not because you've joined a great company, which some of you will do. Not because you go work for government, because some of you will. Not because you invent something smart, because some of you will. But to stay connected, whether as student, as employee, as employer, as sportsman, as business person, as inventor, as designer, stay connected to the brilliant minds of your time. John Galt collected brilliant minds and did not allow it to be co-opted by the powers of the day. They remained free thinkers, brilliant thinkers. And when they all eventually come back onto the stage, John Galt is there with them as the man who stands for the freedom of thinking, the freedom of thought, the ability to construct your own identities, your own ideas in a world that increasingly wishes to control, in a world that continues to make you scared and fearful in a world that says to you, hey, you shouldn't be thinking these things. The president says, develop a new consciousness. John Galt collected the minds of people to ensure that there's a generation of people who will not sell out, not become corrupted, not be co-opted by anyone other than the brilliance of a free mind, the freedom to think. We are all John Galt. And with us are the other great minds. I'm so proud of you, your great mind, with the others in the room. When Atlas shrugs, which is this mountain, when it shrugs, when it throws off the oppression that it carries on its shoulders, it stands tall. Your mind is what we need today as we reset our society. Thank you for being with us today. We're now going to listen back to Yumna, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lorenzo. Lorenzo always says, no, I don't have much to say. And I always, I love how it just comes in the moment. And so thank you very much, Lorenzo, for sharing that. And absolutely this consciousness that we're all going through, this rethinking, reshifting in terms of how we're doing things. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Lorenzo. Always appreciated. And so now next on our agenda, the first and our guest speaker, that's extremely important. I think the actual reason why we're all here today, I would like to introduce Zolani Metu. And just a brief kind of background around Zolani is the founder and director of Decolonial Mental Health. And Zolani holds a qualification, a PhD candidate at the moment with mental health with the Department of Psychiatry at University of Pretoria. He also has a master's degree cum laude mental health research from UCT, and he's actually a professional social worker by trade. So really, Zolani, I'd like to welcome you. I don't want to say too much about you because I want them to just feel you. We've met you. And I'm so excited to have you in this platform. It's such a pity that we don't have this. I love being an engaging kind of live with individuals. And so during this trying time, we'll make the best of it. I really hope that all of you are going to enjoy this afternoon. We're all looking forward to it as community chest staff. So really welcome, Zolani. Thank you so much for being here. Clap.
I suppose this would have been the time where you spend a few minutes clapping for someone. But thanks a lot for that generous introduction. And as introduced, I'm Zolani, and I don't want to waste more of your time. So I come from a company called Decolonial Mental Health. And I'm sure most of you have a lot of questions, and especially Lorenzo, that I probably wouldn't be able to answer. But I love it when those questions come up the minute people hear the name of the company. So in essence, really, I mean, I think Lorenzo has done a great job in terms of grounding this conversation, right? And putting us at a very particular juncture where we're already questioning, you know, the positionality of our minds. And we're already in a space where, you know, we're asking the right questions when it, but also, you know, what it is that we want to get out of our own consciousness. So now Lorenzo's spoken to this idea of a free mind, and I kind of like that idea, a mind that is free from external forces. And I think that's a brilliant way to really ground yourself and see what it is that you as an individual have to offer to yourself and to the world as well. So just a high level idea of what we're going to be talking about today, right? So I'll be taking you through a model that we've developed as Decolonial Mental Health. We've called this the wellness ideology model. And I mean, people interact with it in the various ways in which it lands to their hearts. So as you listen to me, I encourage you to ask questions, ask difficult questions, but hopefully this lands something to you. We'll also be exploring health-seeking behavior from this model. And then also, I want us to maybe take some time understanding this concept of lockdown dissonance and what it truly means. And this really relates to the idea of the body, the mind, and the environment, right? And then thirdly, I want to speak mainly to how we can manage you know, COVID-19 stress and anxiety. In fact, I'm going to be speaking quite generally to that, but I want you to draw back to your own realities as we speak, you know, during this lockdown. So we'll be exploring, the biological basis of stress and anxiety, thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And I want this to be less of an academic exercise and more of a space for you to actually critically engage with the content, but to then reflect the content back to your own self, because I think, very often things sit in the cognitive and this is what's what, but it hardly translates to meaningful, livable experiences. In terms of our engagement today, we'll be engaging through a platform called Mentimeter. And I want to encourage you, if you're using your cell phone for this webinar, it's absolutely fine if you don't have another device. But if you do have a laptop, that probably would make your life a lot easier in terms of interfacing between Mentimeter and being able to watch. But also, if you have a cell phone, you're able to minimize your screen and then go onto www.menti.com. And then also, so for you to be able to engage on Mentimeter, you'll get a code, but that code is going to be displayed on your screen as we proceed. So you'll be able to see what you need to enter. But for the time being, if you're one of those students who do the homework before you finish out in class, I encourage you to go to www.menti.com. We'll also be having the conversation live on Twitter. Well, not live, but we're encouraging you really to have the conversation on Twitter. So you can follow our company page at HealthDMH. You also can follow and tag Community Chest at ComChestWC. The hashtags that we'll be using are DMH Solutions 2020 and CC Bursary Webinar. It's CC Bursary Webinar and DMH Solutions 2020. Now, I think I'm going to be preaching to the choir here. I get a sense that Community Chest is a safe space, but just to put it out there, I'm hoping that this is that platform. But Mentimeter allows you to engage in an anonymous manner. So if you feel that, you're not necessarily comfortable with sharing or anything of that nature, Mentimeter is the best platform for that. Also, just so you understand, we'll be here together for a maximum of an hour. So please prepare yourself psychologically, so that you understand and you're ready for the next hour. Now, I want us to practice using Mentimeter. Please go to www.menti.com and enter the code that is on your screen. The code is 8363390. The code is 8363390. Now, I'll only be able to see if you're using the platform the minute I see responses on my screen. So I'm just going to give you a bit of time. Please go on to Mentimeter and let's see if people are able to interact with the platform. The website is menti.com, www.menti.com. And I'm not seeing any users on my screen so far. So I would like to assume that means no one has gotten on yet. I'm going to wait on you guys to get onto the platform. The question that is on your screen is, how are you feeling at the moment? If you're having any challenges with the platform, can you post on the Q&A section so that I have an understanding of what people's challenges are? So if you're struggling to get onto Menti, let me know. I'll be checking the Q&A section.
I just want to say, I get a question that I'm asked to enter a word. Is that what I'm supposed to do?
Yes. So you're supposed to enter up to 3 words.
Yeah, 8, 3, 6.
You can enter as many as you can.
Okay. So enter the words.
So you can describe any feeling that you're feeling at the moment. I feel, I don't know, sad, I feel down, I feel excited, I feel cool, I feel energetic, whatever the feeling is. This is the fourth industrial revolution. I'm not sure if it's here to capture our minds, whether or not it's going to enhance that psychological liberty that Lorenzo was talking about. But I'm just hoping that you're comfortable with it. I'm going to move on to the next question because I don't want to wait too long. I'm not sure whether people are struggling to get onto the platform. The difficulty here is that you may not be able to engage if you're unable to get onto the platform. So please, I encourage you to do so.
Have you received mine?
Let me see. Okay, I have not received it yet, Lorenzo.
Okay. I have a next question on my screen.
Okay, someone is asking for the code again. The code is 8363 390. 8363390. It's right on your screen at the top there. You should be able to see the code. Okay. The next question would be, who is your queen? I'm not sure, Lorenzo, if, okay, I'm seeing a lot of responses to this question already. Let's see on the previous one, still no responses, but it seems the question about Beyonce has has a lot of questions has a lot of responses as anticipated. And it seems as though Beyonce is winning. I thought Ariana Grande would win. But okay, it seems as though people understand how to use the platform. And I want to get a sense then, what questions do you hope to have answered today, right? I think this, this speaks more to your hopes for this conversation. What do you hope to have answered really? Are there any specific questions that you have which you think, you know, it would be great if Zolani could answer this question. Otherwise, this entire session would have been a waste of my time and my data. Okay, first question is, how do I manage my wellness and how can I be consistent with it? The other question is, how do you track your mental health? Interesting one, it's a very difficult one. How to deal with stress and managing change. The other question is around guidance and skills for coping with stress and how to increase self-discipline. Okay, we've got a lot of questions coming through. So I know I won't be able to get to most of them, but I gather this information so that by the time I report back to Community Chest, I already have a sense of what it was that people wanted to know. So if I didn't read out your question, or if you feel that it hasn't been answered, please don't panic. You might find that later on you're able to get some correspondence from me. I would want to have an understanding of how to improve my mental strength and how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with a short temper and not lash out. Okay, anxiety seems to be coming up a lot. It's a great thing that it's part of the agenda. Okay, great. So now that I've noted people's questions, I just want to ground us with a few definitions. And I know that this is quite a basic thing, but it often determines a lot when it comes to how you understand your reality and how you communicate that. I find that even with mental health practitioners, people often conflate the minute you start speaking about mental health, people want to speak about mental illness. And these two, while they often are interrelated, they're not necessarily the same thing. So mental illness relates to a positive diagnosis of a mental health related illness in terms of a diagnostic criteria set by a mental health practitioner. And globally, there's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is the DSM-5 at the moment. That's what's used currently to diagnose mental illnesses. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that all societies have to use that, but it happens to be the global manual that is used at the moment. And then if we're going to be looking at mental health, this speaks to the overall mental well-being of an individual as affected by physical, social, psychological factors which may result in mental illness, but don't necessarily always have to result to mental illness. Now, I want to expand that definition a bit for you because I think there are other factors which also affect our holistic well-being, right? Financial factors, spiritual factors. Those are key factors that also play into, someone's well-being and mental health. And very often they're overlooked, or the assumption is that they exist in isolation from our well-being. And so those are key elements that I think always should be included. Now, I have a question for you. Can you have good mental health if you are mentally ill? The question is whether you can have good mental health if you are mentally ill. 75% people say they're not sure yet. We've got 19% that says yes. 44%, okay, interesting. This is great stuff. And we have quite a large group that's not sure. Okay, so I get a sense of where people are. So the answer is yes. You can have good mental health even if you have a mental illness. And that's explained by this simple diagram here, right? This is called the mental health continuum. Very basic diagram. But really, it speaks to this idea that, even if you're mentally ill, you can still have better mental health than someone who doesn't have a mental illness. So you've got this quadrant here, which says, sorry, go back. There we go. One says, Nomaelele is focused and slaying these streets with a high level of mental well-being and right? So that's the first kind of person that you can anticipate. You're slaying, you've got optimal mental well-being, and you've got minimal mental illness. So that's me the day I get paid, right? On my payday, oh my God, like my mental well-being is optimal and, generally minimal mental illness. And then you've got the other quadrant here, which says the Grootman has no mental illness, but umgowo is there, iagowa Grootman. Now, if people are very familiar with these terms, you'll understand what we are speaking about, right? You may have, no mental illness still, but you have minimal mental well-being. This is right after those debit orders start hitting. The minute you start seeing those debit orders coming in, your mental health starts to decline and you realize that, yeah, it is tough. So that's the second character that you can see, right? And then you also have the other quadrant where tense, tricky. The Grootman has a mental illness and minimal mental well-being. Now, what we often call this quadrant, we say this is the professional care zone. So this is the kind of person that would most likely be going to therapy. The Grootman needs professional help in this quadrant. So it may be that someone is dealing with depression, they're dealing with a severe anxiety disorder, or whatever they are dealing with. But that's, a space where in which you realize, okay, I've got maximum mental illness and I've got minimal well-being, then perhaps I should speak to someone, right? And then you get a situation where someone has maximum mental illness but optimal well-being at the same time, right? So you see a girl is selling Herbalife, ask her how, like hair and nails on fleek and mental illness can't kill her vibe, right? This is the type of person in general, like in most cases, these are the people who most likely already know what their diagnosis is. They've seen a professional already, they know what they're dealing with, and so they know how to cope with their condition because a practitioner has walked them through the journey, and their social support systems are generally strong. So people in their environment know. And I often find that people who are within this quadrant have a very positive outlook towards their diagnosis. So this is someone that's able to say, hi, my name is Zolani. I've been living with depression for the past 7 years, and these are my coping strategies, right? And that's a very easy quadrant to get to when you've got a strong social support and when you're able to seek professional help should the need arise. Now, I want to ask you, what do you think influences people's decision to seek or not to seek healthcare? This is an open-ended question. What do you think? I mean, it can be anything really, or also based on your experience, right? What have you seen to be a determinant of whether or not you go see a doctor? Someone's already written stigma. Great point. That's a very strong one. Fear of the unknown, fear, finances. Finances are key again with, I think in South Africa, it's only 16% of the population that has medical aid. And so that means the bulk of the country doesn't have access to medical aid. And that has implications on whether or not people are able to seek help. Stigma again, stigma seems to be coming out quite strongly. Denial, that's another factor. And you find that that also plays a significant role within mental health. Most of us can be in denial of where we are. And that's a very strong one, to be quite honest. There are a number of other responses. People don't want to accept that they need help. It's that denial that I think someone had raised already. The issue of access, very key issue. And I think it's very understudied, attended to, under everything. Access is everything, to be quite honest. A fear of aging. That's a very interesting one. I never thought of that one. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. I see you keep the responses coming. So, I mean, we came up with this concept of wellness ideology, and it was so funny. So this came about so I worked in Burundi for a bit, and I tried to when I was there, I realized that there's something about people's wellness ideology, and I thought, let me do a bit of desk research, right? I go on to PubMed, I go on to PsycInfo, PsycIndex, SOC, all the databases, that you can think of. And, at the time I still had access to UCT's university library. And I couldn't find a single thing to read on wellness ideology. And it was quite interesting for me because I thought it was such a basic thing. And I never thought this could be such a, an understudied phenomenon. And then I started having thoughts, we know a lot. There's already a lot of research that's being done. And you'll realize that some of the things that I'm going to speak about are really basic things that are there, but no one has really tried to link them back to health-seeking behavior. So if you're looking at the first issue around wellness attributions, right? We've got different theories that speak to attributions, what people and how attributions determine behavior, for example. So social psychologists will tell you a lot that, what someone attributes to a particular behavior will determine whether or not that behavior is repeated, or whether or not that behavior is diminished. And so when we speak about wellness attribution, the question we're asking is, what are my motives for seeking wellness? What do I believe about wellness, right? So in essence, what do I attribute to wellness? And you find that very often, most of us have different attributions to wellness. So I'll make an example about me. I recently had to go back to psychotherapy because I realized actually there's a need for that. But whenever I think about going into therapy, I think, oh my God, is it even going to be a good practitioner? It's so hard to find good practitioners. And I think, okay, it might be a waste of my time because the person might be telling me things I already know. So there are all these attributions that I have towards seeking health, towards health seeking. And before I even take a step, I need to then sit back with those attributions and say, okay, cool, where does this attribution come from? And I realize, oh, actually, it comes from the fact that I've seen a bad practitioner and I've listened to someone, speaking, and I thought, no, actually, you're wrong. That's not what I'm dealing with. So that's the first facet. For someone else, you may see that their wellness attribution is, I've seen this wellness thing, it's for white people. It's just generally white people bothering about this mental illness. We don't really have it here. We don't deal with that here in Kailicha. We don't, all we know is that, mental illness can come from, a situation where you are bewitched or where you've done someone wrong. And so it's, a bad consequence that you suffer as a punishment. The different attributions that you have. And then there's wellness socialization. So how do we speak about wellness at home? What conversations do we have about it, right? Do we even talk about it? What's the wellness discourse within my community? That also determines health seeking and whether or not you're able to seek help. I can almost guarantee you now. So one of the other questions I typically do when I'm about to start a workshop is, what is mental illness in your home language? And I get the funniest responses when I ask that question. People will ask, responses will be, "Guys, vet menses or idilo tamakhua, izinto zabelungu, hayi uyaphambana uyaqeka, uyasangana." Different, quite stigmatic concepts that are used to define or to speak about mental illness. And that often determines whether or not you're going to seek help, right? Because if you know that in my community, this is the kind of discourse or conversations we have about mental illness or mental health, you're far less likely to seek help if you're worried that, should I get a diagnosis, then people are going to stigmatize me. It comes back to to those issues or factors that you guys identified. Then there's the issue of wellness achievement, which for me speaks mainly to that idea, of finances in most cases, but also just the outcomes of going to therapy or seeking help. So what this speaks to really is the idea that if I've never seen someone who's gone to therapy and gotten better, I'm less likely to buy into the idea because I've never really seen it working. But if I've seen my family going to a local clinic, waiting since 6 a.m. and still coming back without getting the necessary help that they need, I've seen someone go to a psychiatric hospital and they still come back, way more ill than they were, or they don't get the help that they need. Or I've seen someone struggle and leave with a condition and not get the help they need because they didn't have medical aid. Then my wellness achievement, perception is likely to be clouded by that. And so we said, as DMH, we sat and thought, these are the key factors that actually determine whether or not someone is going to seek help. So you'll find finances fall under, wellness achievement. You'll find that, stigma and all these things may fall under wellness socialization. Attitudes, beliefs, and everything may fall under attributions. And this helps us to understand, our clients, because we're then able to say, okay, for a client that is based, in Mannenberg, for example, what's likely to be the reality within that context, and what kind of support is needed in a context like that? And this helps us to make sense of some of those realities. So I've spoken a lot, and I know I've spoken about a theory that has not been proven, a theory that has, no proof it's almost like Freud's theory, right? Freud's theory has never been proven, but it's that theory that's there, and almost every psychologist or social worker you go to is likely to reference Freud, but no one has ever proven any of his theories. And this is one of those things, this is not proven. So any questions, concerns, you know, I would like if it's not even a question, but you know, something that you're like, no, but Zolani, I think you're missing this. You know, I think this is missing from here. This makes no sense. I need you to explain this a bit further. Please do that. Very open to that. Okay. Seems like people are all good so far. Question is, how do you get rid of stigma? Whew, pressure. That's a difficult question. Okay. So it seems like there are no other questions so far. So thanks. I like that question, right? So I'm going to backtrack a bit for you to come back to this diagram. So the issue of stigma would fall under wellness socialization. And what we often say is this comes from conversations within communities. That's how stigma manifests, right? That's interpersonal stigma. And then there's more institutionalized stigma. So institutionalized stigma would be under wellness achievement, because if we're speaking about NHI, for example, right? There had to be numerous discussions and dialogues in order for mental health to be seen as a key facet of NHI. It needed to be a debate. It needed to be a dialogue. And that for me is institutionalized stigma in its own grounding. It's the kind of stigma that is not interpersonal. It's not about projecting any internalized belief onto another person, but the belief system is projected into systems. The belief system is projected into, you know, how a system operates. And then again, you know, this idea of wellness attributions helps us understand those belief systems then. So I would say my response to that is the best way to address the issue of stigma is to speak to core belief systems before you try and, you know, deinstitutionalize it. Before you try and say communities must speak positively about mental health, etc. I think that's surface level work. And very often when people are doing what we call psychoeducation, it's mainly about really like psychologically reprimanding communities more than it is about, you know, challenging or allowing people to express these core belief systems. Belief systems are the foundation of stigma, and I think that's the that's the place you start to address stigma. So that's how I would respond to that question. We need to start interrogating our different belief systems about mental illness and about mental health. And part of that really is us also, creating our own language about mental health and about mental illness, because quite often the language is outsourced, you know. For example, we use the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Diagnosing Illnesses, which is based on the American Psychiatric Association's recommendations in essence. It's a product of the American Psychiatric Association. And so perhaps there's room for us to start exploring what it would look like to have an Afrocentric diagnostic and statistical manual that allows us to diagnose conditions from an African perspective. And of course, someone else may argue that, well, not everything African is good. And I absolutely agree with that. So I still think that there's room for us to start questioning, belief systems about mental health from our own frame of reference. So I kind of want to move on. I'm looking at my time, and I know Belinda is going to kill me if I don't stick to it. I just want to get a sense. Did you find yourself generally feeling sad, lonely, or fatigued during the lockdown? We've got about 9 responses, and so far it's 100%. Okay. Yes, we're starting to see a bit of a breakdown of the responses, which is fantastic. Okay. We're sitting at about 52 responses. That's way above 50%. I'll move on. When we are at 60%, at research level, we say that's the kind of response rate you can at least take seriously. So we're still at 57%, 58. I'm going to wait for 2 more people. Okay, great. So it seems that the vast majority of people have been feeling sad, lonely or fatigued in the lockdown. And I mean, there could be multiple explanations for that, right? But I kind of want to give you this explanation, which I feel no one has been speaking about. I know you've probably heard a lot of stuff, around stress and anxiety and depression, and how, the lockdown has significantly affected that. But I want to take you through this concept of cognitive dissonance and what lockdown dissonance could be about. It was interestingly an American, it was an American psychoanalyst who started speaking about this issue of lockdown dissonance. So Festinger's theory of, cognitive dissonance suggests that we have an inner drive to hold our attitudes and behaviors in harmony and to avoid disharmony. So disharmony would be dissonance in this case. And this is known as this principle of cognitive consistency. And if you're thinking about really, the way our mind works, our mind is so obsessed with consistency and coherence. That's why you feel uncomfortable the minute there's a bit of disorganization, etc. And part of the reason why trauma has quite significant effects is because trauma causes a psychic disturbance or a psychic disorganization, which results to this sense of discomfort. In children, it may manifest in different ways. They may act out, or the child may suddenly wet their bed or do a lot of different things, right? But it's that disturbance that goes against this very nature of our mind, which is to maintain a level of consistency. Now, lockdown dissonance is really the idea that, that there's a psychological dissonance between what we think. So the idea that lockdown compliance is a good idea, right? We know that you need to comply to lockdown regulations. But we still feel this aloneness when we are by ourselves because our bodies are used to being hugged. I knew that when I get to the office, Belinda is going to give me a hug or a handshake or whatever the situation is. Our bodies are used to that, right? We used to a different kind of environment than that which we've been dealt by this lockdown. And that on its own can create a dissonance just from a physical interaction level now. The absence of hugs, the absence of handshakes, the absence of all those basic things which we had attributed to a sense of warmth, we had attributed to a sense of acceptance, a sense of being present with the other, but now that's no longer there. And subconsciously it registers in our minds that even though we may like to act as if we're connected through Zoom, or we like to believe we're connected through Zoom and through Instagram, through Facebook, the absence of that physical presence already creates some cognitive disturbance on its own. And then you move on to the next level around the regulations now, right? You need to comply with lockdown rules. There are police everywhere. There's the military. There's everything. There's a sense of chaos and disturbance. You want to comply, but also at the same time, you're so used to going out. And I'm sure 60% of you, if I asked you, how many times did you go to the shops, even if you didn't need to? Many of you would say yes, because that's what our bodies are used to. We are used to being able to have that liberty that Lorenzo was talking about. Liberty is a key element of, our human nature. So by very fact of knowing that I'm not allowed to go to the shops if it's unnecessary, you kind of want to do it because your body wants to. That does create, a dissonance on its own. Now, the real question is, how do people experience dissonance then? How do you know when you're experiencing this dissonance, etc.? What does it look like, right? It looks like frustration. It may result to stress. It may result to anxiety. It does result to a lot of the other issues that most practitioners are likely to pay attention to. And so you see now what you're looking at is a situation where you started off really with just a disturbance or discomfort, and it's growing into something that you now need to treat, or something that you now need to pay more attention to. And so it's quite important for us to know and have these basic understandings so that you're able to say, okay, Solani, part of the reason why you want to go out is because your body is not used to it. Perfect. Why don't you open your windows, go outside, exercise a bit, do something so that you're able to at least retune your body with what it is used to maintain some level of normality. I think it was at level 4 of the lockdown, I was speaking on ENCA, and I was saying part of the difficulty with this notion of saying people must exercise, go to gym, etc., is that it's quite an elitist suggestion on its own. The presumption is that everyone has a gym subscription and that everyone has space in their homes to exercise. But we do have a reality where 14% of the country's population still lives in shacks, and that's not something we can escape. And so I said on live television, I was saying, well, if it means do a young vosho in the shack, do a young vosho with the children. Whatever you need to do in that moment, do it. Whatever your social environment allows you to do, some activity is better than no activity at all. So I know growing up, skipping rope, if you had no friends, you tie the rope to a pole and you hit it around, and that's your way of doing skipping rope in the absence of another. Try that. That also is something that's workable. Great. So now I want to know from you, how do you usually manage your stress or anxiety? So what do you usually do when you're feeling stressed or anxious? Running. Someone eats, listen to music, eat chocolate. Ooh, that's sugar. Okay, jog, breathe, pray, meditation. Someone goes walking, someone else meditates again. Okay, it looks like community chess people are very healthy. People take walks, people read, people pray and meditate. Well, whatever it is that Belinda and Yumna are doing, your team is doing a great job, because I'm seeing a lot of healthy coping strategies here. So maybe there was no need for me to even be here. But thanks guys. These are great responses, And so bearing in mind, what you say your coping strategies are, right? I just want to express that there's no real best way of going about this, but each person to his own, each person to her own, each person to their own. But I think when it comes to stress and anxiety, I find that this is a very basic principle of cognitive behavioral therapy. So if you went to any mental health care practitioner and you were stressed or anxious, they're more likely to use what is called cognitive behavioral therapy. And it is based on this principle of monitoring thoughts, monitoring feelings, and monitoring behavior. So the questions you ask yourself here is, what do I think about this situation? So that moment when you're feeling stressed, right? There's something called metacognition. This is a level of, cognition where you are able to think about your thoughts. You're able to question your own thoughts. This is, in essence, what reflection is about. When you talk about people who are reflective, these are people who are able to interrogate their own thoughts. What do I think about this situation? Why do I think what I'm thinking? And what do I want to think about this situation? So when you go to therapy, you'll mostly find that your therapist helps you define what to think about the situation. And I often say, and please don't tell my colleagues I said this, I often say that the most basic thing that therapists do is really give you a consciousness of your situation. The work really comes from you. It's not that there's this magic potion that therapists give. The essence of what therapists do is giving you or taking you on that journey of gaining consciousness of your own thoughts. So what are you thinking about this situation? What do you want to think about it? So when you're in those stressful environments or situations, I encourage you to also sit back and say, okay, let me have an outer body experience about this situation and see what I'm thinking about it. and decide what it is I want to think about it. And I know this is not always easy when you're in the moment. So all those other strategies come in. So when you're feeling anxious, trust me, the last thing you want to do is think about your thoughts. When you're having a panic attack in that moment, it's the last thing that's going to come naturally. But I can guarantee you, it can be easy to decide to do intentional breathing, for example, right? So you need to be able to then move in between those, and I'll speak about the management a bit later. Then there's the feelings part. And funny enough, we often put the heart when we talk about feelings, but really feelings are also a segment of the mind, right? And this is where you're asking yourself, again, similar questions. What am I feeling about this situation? And very often what we feel is determined by what we think, right? So you need to then ask yourself, what do I want to feel? And why do I feel this way at the moment? That why is quite important because it helps you prevent feeling away the next time when you're confronted with a similar situation. I make an example, right? Your partner cheats on you, your boyfriend cheats, this has been the love of your life, high school sweetheart, hashtag love lives here, hashtag look at me now, hashtag we are here, right? That's your situation. It can be stressful, especially if this was a relationship that has been broadcasted on social media, everything, people know, that relationship is part of your brand. It becomes quite difficult the minute it is now threatened by someone cheating. So when someone cheats in a situation like that, it's hardly even about the cheating itself. It becomes about, what are people gonna think? Oh my God, you have embarrassed me. This is a public humiliation. Very often, them cheating is the last thing you think about. And so in that situation, it's quite important then to then come back again and say, okay, why am I feeling this way about this? Why do I feel so hurt by Ukolani cheating? It hurts me because I loved him. It also hurts me because I broadcasted our relationship and people know we're together, and it hurts that people are going to see that I've been played. Now Olani is victimizing me, allow yourself to sit in those feelings and then decide, how do I want to feel about this situation? Now, I often say that the how do I want to feel often leads on to the kinds of behaviors that you want to exude, or the kinds of behaviors that you want to assume in response to that situation, right? So you can decide, I'm going to break all his car's windows. I'm going to break all the windows to his house. I'm actually going to go and post on social media so that everyone knows he's a cheating cloth. You can decide what you're going to do about the situation, right? But very often, how you want to feel will determine what you're going to do about the situation. Now, of course, there are more adaptable behaviors and more not so adaptable behaviors. The one thing that is not socially acceptable to say is that sometimes it's okay to release, but the release point doesn't always have to be Polani's car or his windows at home. That doesn't always have to be the release point. The release point can be a punching bag at the gym. The release point can be a brick, throw something, whatever you need to do. That form of releasing allows you to feel a catharsis of sorts. Have to be you punching uspogas, that doesn't have to be the release point, because very often in sort of that cognitive coherence I was talking about earlier on, our minds are likely to find some form of defense in order to get that coherence. Now, being cheated on is a form of trauma, and trauma does disturb that cognitive coherence. And so you're likely to go into a state, what we call automatism, where even without thinking, you find yourself having slept Olani, and then you apologize afterwards and like, oh my God, I didn't want to, I didn't realize, you don't know what went on. That's the automatism that gets people into a lot of trouble in most cases. And so it becomes quite important that you're able to manage your own thoughts in situations like this. So I'm hoping that, in listening to this, at least when you find yourself, even if it's a colleague at work and someone just pisses you off, you know, you're able to then say, okay, why am I so pissed? Why is this an aggravating reality? So that you avoid awkward situations where you now have to account beyond the actual event itself. So this is just a follow-up question. Which coping mechanism would you say is healthier? Exercise, meditation, a few alcoholic beverages here and there, eat, sleep. I see you guys avoiding the bevs, but we know most of you go to the bevs. Okay, I see a few brave souls. A few people are brave enough. Okay, great. We've got quite a high response rate, so I'm going to be able to proceed. So most people see exercise, meditation, yoga, eating and sleeping, repeating, and a few alcoholic bevs as you know, healthier coping mechanisms. So, I mean, I guess the real question is, what determines a healthier coping mechanism, right? What makes a coping mechanism healthier than others? Because someone else may say, well, I mean, if I have a, you know, a young glass of wine when I'm stressed, then surely there's nothing wrong with that, because I'm not an alcoholic, I'm not over drinking, I'm just, you know, having that young glass, right? So what determines a healthy coping mechanism is when you're able to cope in the absence of that mechanism, or that your coping does not necessarily grow too dependent on that mechanism, but also that mechanism should not have clinically significant negative implications for your mental health. So I'll make an example with the BEVs, right? You'll find that in most cases, you'll have a young glass of wine because you had a bad test and that lecturer hates you, or you know, you had this terrible group assignment, and you have a young bev the first time. The minute it becomes a habit that whenever you are stressed, the bev is the run-to place, then that's an unhealthy mechanism, because alcohol is known to have quite significant negative implications for your health. It's unhealthy also because the BEV helps you avoid dealing with the situation. It provides a temporary avoidance. And so you find that when people are having a withdrawal, which is what we call a hangover, when people are withdrawing from the previous night, then the reality comes back twofold. It becomes quite heavier than it was last night. And you find that in most cases, that's where we see a lot of suicidal attempts. During that hangover phase, when people are now having to deal with the reality twofold, it becomes quite tricky. Whereas if you exercise, you go to gym, whatever you're doing, the reality is still there. You haven't offered your mind some arbitrary escape. The reality is still with you, but you're basically transferring the energy into a different object, be it your weights, be it you're running or you're exercising, etc. Meditation, yoga, I often say, if you're going to meditate or do yoga when you're stressed, that's fantastic. But when you're having a panic attack or anxiety attack, it becomes quite difficult to meditate, because meditation requires quite a strong sense of focus, and anxiety diminishes your ability to focus. And so I say breathing, breath work is usually the best way to go about it, but also a healthy mechanism. Eating, sleeping, and repeating, not the best mechanism as well. It's, you know, when you eat a lot, I think we can talk about excessive eating, but I don't think that's the case here. Very often when people are stressed, it's junk food that does the trick. So I bet you people who say they eat, it's not your healthier kinds of food. It's usually ice cream, you know, chocolate. It's usually all those things, very sugary foods, which you know, actually have quite a, you know, a strong relationship. Well, not strong, but like a predominant relationship with depressive symptoms. So what we often say is, if you're feeling depressed, avoid depressing foods. So your depressing foods would obviously be alcohol, sugary beverages, Coke, all these sugary and fizzy drinks, not good when you're feeling depressed. So those are the kinds of food that actually can exacerbate what you're feeling. And the other thing that's really not good, and a lot of people don't realize this, noodles are not good when you're depressed. And those kappa soup things, which I think students love because they're so easy and quick to make. But when you're dealing with depression or you're dealing with a lot of stress, not necessarily the best food for you to consume at that moment. Okay, so stress, I think you know what stress is in the most basic levels, and that's absolutely fine again. But the levels of stress, you know, we deal with this acute stress, which is characterized by immediate danger that occurs within a short span of time, and that activates a fight or flight response of the sympathetic nervous system. But I think I don't want you to bother yourself with these technicalities, but I want you to know that, you know, there obviously is permissible healthy levels of stress. These are your normal stressors. If you're stressed about the test, etc., that's absolutely fine. It's a normal daily stressor. You know, sometimes what we call ADLs, activities of daily living, can be stressful, and that's absolutely fine. Where stress becomes an issue, it's where it does what we call functional impairment. The minute your stress impairs your ability to function, and it has, you know, it is of a clinically significant level. So what that means really is that not only can you not function because of the stress, but you are exuding significant physiological responses as well because of the stress. You get people who develop an anxiety attack because of stress, etc., because very often these things are interrelated. That becomes quite tricky, and you should be then able to say, okay, there's something wrong with the way in which I'm stressing about this. And you should be able to benchmark certain things. It's absolutely fine to be stressed about an exam. But if an exam stresses you to the point where you get significant headaches, you can't eat, you develop poor hygiene, you can't sleep, you know, all these different things, then for me that says there's something here for you to start considering. Now, I know with students, you find especially close to test week. I remember when I was at UCT, test week was the most stressful period ever. And that's the period where you find that, you know, students come with a poor diet. You start eating Movite for dinner, Movite for lunch, and then it's oats for breakfast. And, you know, that obviously can exacerbate your stress. And so you need to start saying, okay, maybe it's time for me to go to gym a bit just to break off from this situation and see if my body can readjust. And then there's your anxiety, which is the body's natural response. Again, there's natural anxiety that you feel. So for example, before this workshop, I thought, oh my God, I was feeling a bit anxious because I thought, how many people am I going to be talking to? Oh my God, what are they going to think about this workshop? Do I even have the right content for this workshop? Am I even saying the right stuff? Is my English sufficient? You know, there are all these things that you think about, and it's natural anxiety. It comes to you. But if the anxiety was so much that I started shivering and I couldn't do anything, or it created what we call a creative avoidance, and I told Belinda, sorry, I can't do it, skis next time, you know, that's quite significant anxiety, which you should be paying attention to. Or, you know, there are some physiological manifestations of the anxiety. You should be paying attention to that. Now, if you feel that, you know, your anxiety attack is significant enough, for example, where you have a physiological response, some people may collapse, some people, you know, may shiver, and all these different things, you typically would need to see someone about that, because there's treatment for anxiety, and it's actually a lot more common among students. There's treatment for it. You know, you can go on pharmacotherapy. But also I recommend breath work for stress and anxiety. And it's the most basic thing ever, you know, because I think we undervalue breath because it comes as second nature. It's there. You wake up and you breathe. No one thinks about it. But there's something about waking up every morning, a practice I've adopted for myself. Wake up every morning before I even get out of bed. 2 minutes is dedicated to my breath. I do what is called square breathing. You can Google it, very basic. You breathe in for 4 seconds, out for 4 seconds, sustain at top for 4 seconds, sustain at the bottom for 4 seconds. You create this breath square of your own. Repeat that cycle. I think within 2 minutes, I do about 8 cycles. And it is amazing. It's you would be shocked by just how that changes your day. It changes the way in which you respond to things. A lot of people call me Saint Paul. I didn't know that that was even a concept. Apparently, a Saint Paul is someone that relaxes in the face of even a burning house. Because ukpola in Xhosa means to relax, and so Saint Paul is somehow a derivative of that. But really, in terms of managing stress, then I want to say, you know, psychotherapy also helps if you're dealing with an acute stress or, you know, a severe anxiety. It's always great to go for psychotherapy. Now, I often feel like I need to say this because in most cases, people don't know who or where they can get psychotherapy from. Your social workers, if they're trained, they can offer psychotherapy. Your psychologist, if they are trained, they can offer psychotherapy. Not all psychologists can offer psychotherapy. A social psychologist can't offer psychotherapy. You know, so there are different professionals that can. Some psychiatrists can also offer psychotherapy. Some psychiatrists are only trained in pharmacotherapy, and so they try and avoid that. But there are different professionals that can offer you that. There are nurses we call psychiatric nurses or mental health nurses. They also can offer psychotherapy. So you'll find that the costing differs in most cases. Social workers and nurses generally don't cost or don't charge too much. So if you feel like you can't avoid this psychiatrist, go for a psychiatric nurse. You will get similar help that you need, and that's also useful help that you can absolutely tap into. But I absolutely recommend psychotherapy. I'm a psychotherapist myself, and I'm in psychotherapy as well. I have a therapist of my own, and that just helps me when I'm struggling with clients' realities. I've got someone I can go and offload everything to. It's always great to have a release point. And then lifestyle adjustments. This is the difficult part because in most cases, I think when we think about lifestyle adjustments, thinking about waking up in the morning in front of your mirror and saying, I'm beautiful. Yes, think positive. It's not necessarily that. You literally cannot positively affirm your way out of depression. You cannot positively affirm your way out of an acute stress. You need to seek help when that's the case. But when we speak about lifestyle adjustments, we're speaking about some of these other things you can do, going to gym or doing any physical activity in the house, doing your yoga, etc. But I see a lot of people now having all these affirmative texts grinding down their wall, and you see people waking up with all these different codes, you know, I am beautiful, I am queen of Azania, it's great. That's great stuff when you're someone with a high functionality already. But when you're dealing with a situation where, you know, your mental health is compromised quite significantly, it doesn't matter if Zolani can come and say, no, queen, hashtag you are slaying, you know, and that's the general culture at the moment. Online, someone can be depressed and someone comes and comments and says, oh, but queen, you slaying these streets. That's not going to change the fact that that person is dealing with that condition. So lifestyle adjustments should make sense, and lifestyle adjustments should actually appeal to where you are psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually as well. We've come to the end of that. Just want to get a sense from you. How was this session? Okay, good. Getting some good feedback there. I mean, if any of you have questions that you felt as though were not answered in this session, I encourage you to speak to Belinda or Yumna or Lorenzo, whoever is easily accessible to you. Ask those questions and I'll try and respond to the ones that I can respond to. But in essence, I want to thank you guys. And also I want to wish you all the best. And I hope this has been useful information for you. Yeah, thank you. Back to you, Belinda, then.
Thank you so much, Zulani. That was truly, I think just the engagement. It's always so difficult to be in a platform like this that we struggle because there's not this, you know, kind of direct engagement, but there's been a lot happening on our chat. And so thank you everybody for commenting. Zulani has said, Belinda's available, I'm available. Zulani is there, we can possibly just engage on that level. It's just been such a, I think, one sometimes forget, I think, the basic practical things that we need to do and kind of focus on, and that we get so overwhelmed by what's currently happening that we lose sight of the thinking process that goes with that. So, Zulani, it's really been such an engaging session. Thank you very much from your side. Before we do hand over to Belinda to do this, thank you, Lorenzo. Do you like to say a few last words? Just your mute. Yeah.
Unmute. I'm here. Sorry, I just thought my screen just went blank. Hello. Zulani, thank you very much for those thoughts. I think building the conversations around mental wellness and structuring the sort of thought processes that allows us to explore almost this inner fragility that we carry and not be scared of it is a very powerful notion. This fact that we can be vulnerable and hook ourselves into clinics and go and talk to somebody who can address our mental states are powerful issues. And so thank you for sharing that with us. As somebody who's been to therapy, I can strongly say that, yeah, it's a very safe space. It's a very healthy space to do. And it's not something that you should be scared of or that other people should criticize you when you do go for those engagements. It is actually a very safe, wonderful, and common practice. And our society must grow into not criticizing you because you want to explore those spaces. So thank you for sharing that deep truth with us today, my brother.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo. And I think exactly that. I think Zulani spoke a lot about the stigma, and people commented a lot about the stigma and people's judgments around mental well-being and mental health. And so just a last message from myself, I think just there is stigmas. There's going to be stigmas around many of the things that we experience in our lives. But at the end of the day, it's about you and your own self and your own life. And so we are, I want to say that to you. I mean, Community Chess Belinda has really been in contact with all our students and really been engaging with regards to that. So we are a call away. And please contact us, make contact with us. And so from my side, thank you very much to all of you. I'm going to be handing over to Belinda to do the formal thank you from our side. Thank you.
Thank you, Yumna. I would like to thank our board members for supporting us and working behind the scenes. And to our guests, thank you so much for joining us and supporting us. A special mention to our special guests that were part of our webinar. Thalas, Ezekias, Cordelia, thank you for joining us. Rudy Byers from Cornerstone, thank you so much for your support. And to our CEO, thank you so much for being inspirational. I know you all heard him. He said we need your mind to be active and stay connected to great minds. And to our guest speaker, thank you so much, Zulani, for taking your time to go through this important topic during this addressing mental wellness. And I can surely vouch for other people and say we all of us really benefited from this conversation. And to Community Chess team members, thank you so much for being a dream team and for willing to go extra mile. And lastly, our students, thank you so much for joining in. I am inspired by you guys. This year was a hard year, but you were persistent, resilient, and were very dedicated this year. So here is to graduating and finishing on a high note. And just remember what Zulani said, thoughts feelings, and behavior. So thoughts, what do I think about this situation? And then feeling, what am I feeling about this situation? And behavior, what am I doing about this situation? So always think that, so that, you know, we don't always lash out. I always say during this pandemic, everyone is in a different zone. So you don't always match up to their situation. So these three things actually brings us to checking on ourselves and actually being positive and avoid situations. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Belinda. And from our side, the last part of just thanking you all for being here, for joining us, and all the best for the exams coming up. And we're looking forward to seeing all the graduations that's taking place at the end of the year. And so here's to us building resilient leaders in our sector. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day further.